One thing I've been interested to try and wrap my head around is the development studios that put out the games that I play. The stories of the development are interesting, but I'm more so looking for personnel at these companies, so if I enjoy something, I can have a better basis for the people behind it and follow their journey. And since I've been playing the 2019 Blair Witch game lately, I figured we'd take a look at the studio behind it, Bloober Team. Bloober Team was founded by Piotr Babino and Piotr Bajlatowicz in November of 2008. Fair warning, they're based out of Poland, and I have no faith in how I'm going to be pronouncing some of these names. Anyway, the two Piotr's were working for another company called Nibris, and decided to spin off their own company out of that. Nibris being a short-lived venture that only ever released one game, but had 3 others cancelled, with the best known being Sadness, a survival horror game that was supposed to come out for the Wii. Nibris would go defunct in 2010, with many of the developers finding a home at Bloober. With this new staff base, they would mainly work on smaller PSP, Vita, and mobile games. Maybe you've heard of them, I haven't. The most popular of these I assume being Paper Wars Cannon Fodder, which seems to have the best reception. It's a tower defense game, so they were kind of all over the place. The first game I ever heard of from them being Basement Crawl, which was poorly received and I don't think I ever played it, but it was one of the earliest games to come out on the PS4. Since PS4 wasn't backwards compatible, it was kind of a big deal to be in the launch window for that console, so I'd assume that game got their name out there at the very least. It also marks a bit of a shift into more horror-centric games, because after this title, their fairly eclectic catalog sobered into one category. The next game they released would be Brawl, which continued the horror aesthetic but was still a puzzle game. It wouldn't sell as well as Basement Crawl, but supposedly it was a better game. It would also be given away for free to people who bought Basement Crawl, because apparently that game was just that bad, and they wanted to fix some of the brand damage. Either way, it would be their next game that would really put them on the map. Layers of Fear would be a typhoon for Bloober, hitting both with critical and commercial success, repairing a lot of the damage that Basement Crawl had done to their reputation. Released in 2016, it would be the game to solidify a new course for the studio, and would lock in a good few positions in terms of leaders in the company, setting up a man named Mateusz Lenart as lead creative director for the next several years, as well as Andrzej Madrzak as lead story writer, and Arkadiusz Rejkowski as lead composer. I played this one myself. I didn't find it that memorable. Lots of looping hallways from what I remember, but it's been years. Anyway, it would be a big success for the studio, whose next step would be a game called Observer, another fairly well-received one starring well-known actor Rutger Hauer, but it wouldn't be as big a commercial boon as Layers of Fear. This leading them to dip back into that well with a sequel in 2019. Layers of Fear 2 seemingly not doing as well as the first, but certainly not a failure. 2019 was a busy year for the studio though, as not only did they put out Layers 2, but also Blair Witch some 3 months later. By this point, Bloober was already on their way to being a powerhouse studio. In July of 2019, Maciej Glomb, a producer for the studio, giving an interview and saying that the studio was around 100 people. Those people being split into 3 teams, with Team 1 working on Layers 2, Team 2 working on Blair Witch, and Team 3 working on something else. To go into a bit more of the details surrounding this game, since that's kind of the crux for my interest here, Lionsgate had acquired the rights to Blair Witch in 2003 after Artisan would merge with them, leaving the franchise essentially abandoned for a decade after the critical failure of Book of Shadows. It would be the first Layers of Fear game that would apparently catch Lionsgate's eye, and they would contact Bloober with a potential collaboration effort, which would turn out to be this game. My guess being that Lionsgate wanted to breathe life back into this brand, starting with momentum from their movie in 2016, which was, at best, mid, and then also this game, which was also mixed. As such, it died for another decade, with another attempt slated for September of 2027. Anyway, the game would apparently sell fairly well, probably thanks to interest in the IP, but would be middling in terms of reviews. It was also the start of a short partnership between Bloober and Xbox, which would see Blair Witch have 4 months exclusivity to Xbox platforms and Game Pass before being ported to PS4. That partnership would continue through their next game, The Medium, which would be arguably their best received yet. The game proving the studio to have more technical prowess as it offered two perspectives, one for the physical plane and one for the spiritual plane. It would also see them in collaboration with Akira Yamaoka, whose work is best known for the Silent Hill franchise, a tether that would be expanded on very soon. Before that, though, they would head back to the Layers of Fear well, this time putting out Layers of Fear. Yes, it's confusing, but they would apparently remake both the first and second Layers of Fear games and release them together in a new game where they pushed the stories together and added new content. I never played it, but it confused me at the time and still baffles me as a business decision today. It released in 2023 and I don't believe it was very lucrative. Fortunately, just around the corner in 2024 though, they had another trick up their sleeve. The biggest yet.
今回のサイレントヒル2はポーランドのホラーゲームのスペシャリストブルーバーチームで制作しています。
By 2024, Konami had all but abandoned the Silent Hill franchise to rot. The last major produced title in the franchise being Silent Hill Downpour, which was released some 12 years before in 2012. However, a shift in corporate strategy would see them taking back up the reins of the series, with the first title in over a decade being handed over to Bloober, tasked with remaking the most beloved of their original games, Silent Hill 2. A task that many, myself included, weren't sure they were prepared to conquer, a lack of experience in combat being chief concern among many. However, Bloober had been aggressively bidding to be given a chance to take a crack at the series, and Konami would put their full faith in them. A decision that would pay dividends, as Bloober would show that they were indeed the right studio for the job. Bringing in some key talent to assist them from the original game, they would set about remaking this classic, striking up a deal with Sony to give PlayStation 1-year console exclusivity, and once it was released, it would sell like hotcakes, seeing both critical and commercial success from right out of the gate, solidifying a new position for the studio as an industry heavyweight. This leading them into the release of their next game, a new IP known as Cronos: The New Dawn, which would also be a success for the studio, but on a smaller scale. A win as a new IP, but obviously not hitting the same numbers as Silent Hill 2, with that being their most current release at the time of me posting this video. As for upcoming games, they've really branched out since the days of Basement Crawl. Apparently, they've still got two primary teams in-house, with one of them seemingly currently working on a remake for the first Silent Hill game, the other being more mysterious, but seemingly working on another new IP. It's the team that just did Cronos, with subsets of that team assumedly working on DLC for Cronos in association with a floater Team 3. Outside of that, they created another subsidiary studio in 2024 called Broken Mirror Games, who also currently have some games in the works, those being a mysterious Nintendo-centric horror title, as well as a 3v1 Saw game, continuing Bloober's collaboration with Lionsgate. They've also got a partner studio working on Layers of Fear 3 with Bloober's creative input, and they've got a collaboration with Paramount Games for Star Trek Shadow Frontier. Lots of projects in the air, kinda crazy when it's all in perspective. From a 20-person spin-off of a failed studio to a 250-person juggernaut taking up the mantle on some massive IP, Bloober's had a pretty insane ride. They've got their two main teams, and a lot of their staff seems to be sticking around even as they grow. Another notable name I didn't mention earlier being Wojciech Pajko, who stepped up to the game director's chair for Cronos, as well as Jacek Ziba. Then, the game also had different writers. My personal assumption being that the two teams are solidifying personalities and talent, whereas prior to the success of Silent Hill 2, maybe it was more collaborative. As such, perhaps Mateusz Lenart will be the lead of Team 1, while maybe Wojciech Pajko and Jacek Ziba will be the lead of the more explorative Team 2. No idea, total stab in the dark, but it sounds good and makes sense to me. I guess we'll see when their next game comes out. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you all in the next one.